If you've ever switched your camera to manual mode and then immediately thought, absolutely not, this video is for you. Manual mode is so confusing because all of a sudden your camera starts showing you all kinds of numbers like this, and none of it makes any sense. When in reality, manual mode is really just one simple idea, and that is you controlling the amount of light entering your camera to expose an image. Most people think manual mode means memorizing complicated photography settings and doing math on the spot, which obviously nobody wants to do. But really, there's only 3 things your camera cares about when you're building an exposure, and those come down to shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And all 3 of these are just different ways of controlling the amount of light entering your lens and being read by your sensor. Once you start to understand how these 3 work together, manual mode becomes a lot less confusing. So in this video, I'm going to explain what manual mode means, what those 3 settings do, what the secret to understanding those 3 settings are, and why learning manual mode is one of the best things you can do to take better photos of your children. First things first, so that we're all on the same page. When I'm talking about manual mode, I'm talking about adjusting your mode dial to the M. So on top of your camera, you're going to see a mode dial with a bunch of letters or symbols. And when you turn it to the M, you're basically telling your camera, I got this. I know exactly what settings to choose to expose an image properly. Okay, we are not talking about turning the lens and manually focusing an image. Manual focus is different from manual mode. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I mean. I think we can all agree it'd be really helpful to see somewhat of an example before this goes over your head. So right now, my camera is set to M for manual mode. If I look through my viewfinder to take a photo, and then choose to change any one of the 3 exposure triangle settings, so let's say ISO, you can actually see the exposure change right through the viewfinder. And when I say exposure, all I'm talking about is the light that is entering the camera and then being read by the sensor. So if I take the photo using those settings, the camera is going to believe me and take the photo using the exact settings that I chose, and that is manual mode. That's all it is. Now, the purpose of manual mode is having maximum creative control over the image that you're creating. You're going to manipulate those 3 settings to create an image. And you may have heard photographers call this the exposure triangle. So the exposure triangle are those 3 settings that make up an exposure, aka your image. And those 3 settings again are shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Together, these settings are going to tell your camera how you want it to capture the light in front of you. They're going to determine how bright or dark your image is, but they also each have a different creative effect on your photo. And that is why learning manual mode is so powerful, because when you're shaping your image, all 3 of these settings are building different parts of it. Again, you're really not just adjusting the brightness, you're offering yourself maximum creative control over how your image looks at the end of the day. So let's go ahead and look really quickly at what each 3 of these settings does. So shutter speed. There's an actual shutter on your lens that's going to open and close to allow light to enter your camera. And with shutter speed, you get to determine how long the shutter is open to let in the light. So when we use a fast shutter speed, you can think of it like your camera blinking. And when you blink really fast, you're only able to capture a small snippet of information, right? So that's why a fast shutter speed is really useful when you're photographing things like toddlers, kids, pets, sports, because you want to capture the movement frozen. When you use a slow shutter speed, you're allowing the shutter to be open for longer, letting in more light, but also capturing more of that movement. So it'll be more of a movement blur. Then we have aperture, and aperture is actually a diaphragm on your lens that opens to allow light in, and you get to decide how wide that opening is, okay? So the wider the aperture, the more light that's going to enter your lens, but it also creates what we call a shallow depth of field. So it creates that beautiful background blur that we love in portraits, which we call bokeh in the background. That's a wide aperture is what's going to create that shallow depth of field. A narrow aperture, even though it's letting in less light, is actually going to allow you to see further into the image. So aperture is not just about brightness or how much light is coming into the lens. It's also about the depth of field and how far you can see clearly into the image. Lastly, we have ISO or ISO, depending on how you want to say it. And ISO controls your camera's sensitivity to light. So the lower the ISO, you're telling your camera, hey, there's tons of light available. We got this. I don't need you to pay too much attention. And that typically produces the clearest image. The more you bump your ISO up, the more you're telling your camera, hey, there's less light available. I need you to pay more attention. And we start to introduce grain and noise into the image as sort of a consequence of increasing the ISO. Now, at this point, you may be wondering, how am I supposed to know what numbers to use when? What's the secret? And the secret is this tool on your camera called the light meter. So your camera has a built-in TTL light meter, or through the lens. And essentially what that means is it can measure the light entering your lens and then give you feedback on that based on the settings that you've inputted for those exposure triangle settings. So it's taking what you told it for how to control the light entering the camera through the lens, and then it's going to read that light and give you feedback. So you're going to find this light meter through your viewfinder or on your LCD screen. It's a little number line that has negative numbers to positive numbers. There's also going to be a little ticker. So you are trying to get your ticker right in the middle. And that means it's telling you, hey, based on the light that I'm seeing and what settings you told me to control the light entering the lens, we're going to have a properly exposed image. That image is going to look good. Now, if it starts to go off to the right to those positive numbers, then we're looking at an image that may be too bright. And the light meter measures in what we call stops of light. So if you're at the 1 or 2, that's 1 stop of light too bright or 2 stops of light too bright, okay? If you go negative, we're looking at, obviously your image is going to be too dark. So you use that light meter to then make adjustments to your 3 exposure triangle settings to try to get it back to a properly exposed image. It's not magic or perfect, but it's a really helpful guide. So you can use that as a feedback tool to decide what settings you need to use on your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And that's kind of it. That's like the mystery of it. There are also actually different metering modes where you can tell your camera how you want it to meter the light entering your camera. But most cameras are set to a default of sort of an evaluative or overall, just measure what you see. Don't look at a particular spot and see how bright or dark that is. Manual mode in action is essentially just choosing the settings to capture the light in front of you. Once that clicks, photography starts to feel so much less confusing and much more creative. Okay, so we're back in my living room. This is a dark part of my living room. Normally I would turn off anything but natural light, but for the sake of video lighting, we're gonna leave those on. So we're gonna have some mixed lighting in this image and that's okay, but I thought it'd be helpful to do manual mode one more time, walk through a full real world example. We'll see if my dog even cooperates for this. I genuinely don't know if this is gonna work. But I wanted to show you working through all 3 of the exposure triangle settings and like manipulating an exposure and taking an image start to finish, okay? So here we go. All right, so if we look through the viewfinder, you're gonna see that this is so underexposed, you can't see anything. My camera can't even focus really, it's so underexposed. It's over 3 stops underexposed. So we're gonna go from left to right and try to get a proper exposure and then take a cute photo of my dog, okay? So the first thing I'm gonna do is make my shutter speed slower. And I don't wanna go too slow because she is a live subject. Okay, we can almost see her. Then I'm gonna open up my aperture a little bit wider, not too wide. And then I'm going to increase my ISO to let in more light because I still need more light, right? Like I'm still 2 stops underexposed. So we're gonna increase this until we get our ticker towards the middle. Okay, Isla, can you sit? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, and then we're gonna try to get a picture of her. Isla, this doesn't work. Okay, fine, we'll try this. Okay, I have to look through my iPad screen, sorry, because I've got you guys hooked up. Okay, ready? Can you sit still? So in this scenario, like I genuinely want a faster shutter speed, honestly, because she's being so wiggly right now. But we're gonna try to get her still and see if we can take the photo. Now she's trying to bite me. Sit. Sit. What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? Good girl. Okay, we got one. So that's what it's like. 0 of 10 recommend using a dog as your first model. But you can see, so all we did was we went through each 3 setting. We opened up to get more light into our camera. In this scenario, you might have a scenario where you need to remove some light to get a proper exposure, okay? But that's what working in manual mode is like. It's understanding the light that you have in your scene and then making small adjustments to each of the 3 exposure triangle settings until you can get a properly exposed image. Okay, thank you, Isla. Thank you. So if manual mode has ever felt incredibly confusing to you, which I'm sure it has, you are not alone. If you're looking for more resources on how to understand manual mode and get better at photography as a mom, then you can go to a couple places. You can subscribe to this channel. You can check my blog. I also have a full-fledged online photography course developed just for moms. So if any of that interests you, you can drop down to the description of this video for more resources.